PJ, obviously the pandemic affected your life very significantly. You didn't play last season. What was it like, and I presume you did get vaccinated, what was it like emotionally for you when you got vaccinated?
So I was going back and forth on, whether to do it or not. But and I talked to my parents, and once they got it done, I was like, well, there's no point for me not to get it done. And obviously I opted out because of COVID. So why come back and get COVID? I'll just be pretty silly. But sorry. But once I talked to my parents, they had got vaccinated. I was like, well, I feel like this is the right thing to do. So I went and got vaccinated as well.
Yeah, for many people, it's a simple logic. If you're concerned about getting COVID, you get the vaccine. Guys opted out last year because they were concerned about getting COVID, passing it to family members. So this year, you come back and play. There's a vaccine that's available. You get the vaccine. You're concerned about the facility. You get the vaccine. The logic seems far simpler than it ultimately plays out in practice, Peter, and that's part of what we're going to talk about. You had a report that was stunning to me on Monday that one team has managed to get 65 of 90 players vaccinated now, 6 weeks away from training camp. That's an impressive number, and that suggests that team will get to an 85% threshold at which there may be added benefits for the teams involved. That may be an outlier, though, because I get the impression a lot of these coaches are quietly frustrated that their guys aren't choosing to get vaccinated sooner rather than later.
Well, definitely. You heard how frustrated Sean McDermott of the Buffalo Bills was because it appears as though they're going to have a very hard time getting enough players vaccinated to live sort of 2019 lives. And just so that viewers understand what we're talking about, Mike, right? In 2019, pre-pandemic, everybody was just coming in and out of business just like they were all across the United States. Everything was normal. But in 2020, every team, all players had to be masked. There were significant restrictions when you went on the road to play a game, other than to go to your meeting room and go and get your to-go meals to eat in your room. You couldn't leave your hotel. Everything was restricted. You couldn't go out during your bye week. You were basically captive. You had to stay in your city and get tested before 8 o'clock every morning. So now the prospect is that if you get, and I keep hearing the number is 85%, just like it is in baseball, but if you get 85% of your players vaccinated, which in the NFL I believe is 77 of 90 in training camp. So if teams get 77 players vaccinated, then they can go back to having business as usual. And so that is what coaches really, really want. And you want to see frustrated coaches, and I did ask one coach about how his team would be different this year if they had to do it. And he goes, quite honestly, he said, we're going to work very hard to make this not be the case. But I worry about internal problems with the team, with some players saying, get the bleeping vaccine, so that we can go and have basically kind of normal lives. But here's the biggest issue, Mike, that in my mind is going to convince some hesitant players to get the vaccine. I think there's a good chance that during a team's bye week this year, if you play for the New England Patriots and you're from Southern California and you plan to go home in your bye week, you won't be able to go home. You will have to stay in New England and go to Foxborough by 8 o'clock every morning of the bye week. You won't even get to sleep in during the bye week. And you'll have to go and get a test every day to make sure that when the team gets back and resumes practices after that bye week, that you can come back with them, in that relative normalcy, with masks and with restrictions.
It's one thing when everyone on the team has to do that every day, get the test every day, can't go away during the bye week, got to get tested every day, got to wear the mask, everyone's got to do it. And then when it's only the ones who haven't been vaccinated, that is a silent peer pressure that is going to, I think, get some of the players who are on the fence to go ahead and do it. Different people have different reasons for not doing it. They continue to tell us that the vaccines are safe and effective, and the idea is to get the American population to 70% vaccination so we can get to herd immunity and get on with our lives completely normally again, which would be great if we can get there. But once these guys understand, and Peter, I think the eureka moment for plenty of players will be, wait a minute, during the bye week, I can go wherever I want to go. I don't have to stay here. I don't have to get tested every day. If nothing else convinces them, I feel like that will.
I do too, Mike. We'll see what happens. But it's funny, this coach who told me he had 65 players, it's not that he was cocky about getting to 77, but he felt like he was going to have a good chance to get to 77 players. And I think, I mean, look, I'm probably being naive about this, Mike, but I think that there are going to be quite a few teams that'll get not only to 77, but once the season starts, that will get to 85% of their final 53-man roster. And the one thing that needs to be clarified, I think, by the NFL and NFLPA whenever they come to an agreement about this, I think it has to be so, let's find out for sure how big the practice squad is going to be. 14, 16, 15, 12, whatever it is. But I'm assuming that those players are going to be a part of it. So it's not necessarily going to be 85% of 53 players. It's going to be 85%, let's say, of 67 players. So I think those are big questions that need to get answered before the season starts.
Well, it's 57 players who would need to be vaccinated if you have 67 in the pool. It's 45 if you look at the 53-man roster. And that's an important point because, and technically, whether or not a player is vaccinated is not a permissible factor for deciding whether or not he gets released when they cut from 90 to 53. Technically, they're not allowed to do it. And you can't say the quiet thing out loud like Bills GM Brandon Beane did. He found out directly from the NFL. You can't say that. But, Peter, let's not be naive about this reality. When the time comes to put all the names out there and you decide who you're keeping and who you're staying, and I saw somebody suggest on Twitter also the Bills are going to cut Josh Allen. No. If he doesn't get vaccinated, he's safe. It's the guys in those last 10 spots. If you're vaccinated, you're more likely to stay. If you're not, you're more likely to be gone. If you're a bubble guy, it is going to be a factor that helps you if you've been vaccinated, and it's going to be a factor that hurts you if you haven't been. No one has to say it. They need to be careful not to have a bunch of emails or any other text messages that would reveal that, we got to get rid of this guy, he's not vaccinated. But they're going to know who is and isn't vaccinated. This isn't some secret information. And so I don't think the union's going to push them on this either, because the union understands at the highest levels the value of vaccinations. Guys who were not vaccinated, who are fringe players, Peter, I think are going to be cut.
I think they have a better chance of being cut than guys who have been vaccinated.
All things
the way
equal.
I look at
all
it
things
is,
equal. All things equal.
Yes, all things equal.
Two guys. All things
Why wouldn't
equal.
you?
One guy's vaccinated, one's not. The guy who's vaccinated stays. The guy who isn't goes. That's what's going to happen, even though they're not supposed to make that a factor.
And look, who could blame anybody in the NFL for doing this? You want to get back to normal. You want your team to have some freedom. You want your players to have some freedom. And what better way to do this than to get 85% of your players vaccinated and get back to some semblance of 2019? Now, you talk about the Josh Allen example. You're absolutely right. No really good player is getting cut because he isn't vaccinated. But that's what I said a minute ago, Mike. There are going to be some things going on if some team is 2 players away from that 85% limit. You don't think there's going to be some tacit and maybe some overt pressure on the unvaccinated players to stop bleeping this up for the rest of us? I mean, that also is going to be a factor, I believe, in some teams. And, you know, you're hearing it now. I've read a lot about different baseball teams where, you know, the Chicago Cubs, the general manager is incredibly frustrated. He never thought that being a general manager is going to require him to plead with players. Please take this vaccine, which can help you prevent getting a very serious disease. I mean, but that's what they have done. So, I mean, we're going to see that happen in the NFL. We don't know the stories yet, but it will happen.
And let me just add this point, and I am joking when I say it, but I can't resist it. The hazing ritual of tying a guy to the goalpost, this year when they tie the guy to the goalpost, hey, go ahead and vaccinate him while we have him immobilized. That may happen. It's not going to happen, but I'm just, you know, that is going to be a real locker room dynamic. You get a leader in the locker room who has been vaccinated and wants to have the benefit of the 85% threshold and wants to be normal, and he's a dynamic, strong leader, I can guarantee you that team's getting 85%, and that's going to be part of it as well. I was fascinated by something that happened yesterday. Jordan Poyer, Bills defensive back, was asked about whether or not he's been vaccinated, and we may hear more of what Poyer had to say yesterday. Let's hear how he responded to questions about whether or not he has gotten or will get the vaccine.
Real quick before we start, I'm not going to be answering any questions about the vaccine, so you guys can direct your questions all to football. I would love to answer them, so all respectfully, I appreciate it.
The NFL put out numbers that teams need to reach certain levels of vaccinations, and there's that word. If you reach those levels, you would be able to go to St. John Fisher and actually have a return to normalcy in some sense. Do you foresee that happening?
John, I appreciate you, and you know, you've done interviews with me a long time, dude. But I'm just not answering any questions that have anything to do with the vaccine.
And right,
I understand. I don't even want to put that in the I like camp at St. John Fisher. I like camp here. They're two totally different places. Camp here, you get all the facility. You know, camp there, obviously, you get the camaraderie with the guys staying, but you know, at the end of the day, that's not my decision to make. And so, you know, I'm just here with my team right now. But I like I said, John, you know, it's all respect, but that's how I'm going to answer that.
You know, it's clear from Poyer's comments that he, I would surmise, hasn't gotten vaccinated, doesn't intend to get vaccinated. Why would you not want to talk about it if you have been and you support it? So I think we can infer that he's in the camp where, number one, I haven't gotten it. Number two, I ain't getting it. And number three, I ain't talking about it. And, you know, Peter, I saw some reaction on social media to the story we posted about his comments. And of course, social media, it is what it is, and what it is at times is not good. But the attitude is, well, this is a medical thing, and it's HIPAA, and it's private. Look, this is part and parcel of a football team. Because of that 85% threshold, because of the less restriction that's going to apply to the guys who have been vaccinated, it becomes an integral part of your 2021 football experience. This isn't about the science of vaccinations, the philosophy of vaccinations. This is about checking boxes and getting a team back to normal, plain and simple.
And, you know, one of the things that is going to be odd for me to think about is when you have guys that are, you know, Jordan Poyer has been a tremendous, not only player, but he's been a tremendous leader for that Buffalo defense. And so we'll see what happens, Mike. I don't know whether Jordan Poyer, I would infer the same thing as you, but I don't know that. I mean, I guess my whole point about all of this is that I think we're in a divided time in our country, and we have the potential to have potentially a divided time among teams this year. And I fully understand why a lot of players don't want to talk about it, don't want to address it, don't want to do anything, because for all we know, Jerry Hughes of the Bills and whoever else on the Bills, the guys who are sharing the same locker room, are ferociously pro-vaccine. And so, you don't want to open this can of worms where it's player versus player on a team, because all that can do is help tear your team asunder. That's why it's going to be so interesting to see. I mean, Mike, can you imagine this year? Just imagine this year that some Team X is 2-12. It's late in the year, and they're still having all these restrictions, and their team is closed off and all this. Don't you think word is going to start leaking out of there that this guy is ticked off at that guy because he's preventing him from getting to 85? I absolutely think that's going to happen.
And Peter, the Bills are at the center of this for now. And we're not picking on the Bills. They're the ones who have created the stream of news. It started with Josh Allen expressing equivocation about the vaccine. Brandon Beane saying the quiet thing out loud, took it to another level. Sean McDermott complaining about the difficulties in getting guys to get vaccinated. And, this may affect all 32 teams equally, or it may just be there are hot spots here or there, and it can affect the chemistry of a team. It can affect the locker room dynamic. And let's say, regardless of whether or not there's a paper trail that would allow grievances to be filed against the Bills when it's time to cut the roster to 53, if guys in the locker room who are good enough, like Jordan Poyer, to be exempt from being shown the door because they haven't been vaccinated, if they think that the last 15 spots on the roster were given to guys who were vaccinated at the expense of guys who weren't, that could stir it up even more.
Mike, the one other thing that you're talking about right now is that as you go along during the course of a season, I think it can become a tremendous competitive advantage, both mentally and potentially physically, for other teams. If one team in a division has only 60% of their guys vaccinated and another team in the division has 90%, and they got all the freedom, everything is beautiful, it's wonderful, and then the other team, you're starting to see cracks in the chemistry. Look, and we don't know what November is going to bring. We simply do not know. But I can just tell you that these are the possibilities that smart people in the NFL have thought about, smart team people have thought about, and they're just hopeful of getting to 85%.
And Peter, there's a very simple argument to be made to those who are reluctant. And I say this from the perspective of someone who is willing to give the government the benefit of the doubt when the former presidents line up all but one and tell us it's safe and effective. And there is a push for all of us to get it for the greater good because it is safe and effective and because the side effects and the serious consequences are very few and very far between. So I'm coming from that perspective. But I would say to a player who's on the fence, think about everything you would do, everything you would give up for a chance to win a Super Bowl. Okay. Go get the shot. If getting the shot improves your team's chances of winning a Super Bowl, then go get it. Think of all the illegal drugs guys have done over the years to improve their ability to play, to make them better. Things that have far worse side effects than a vaccine if we're going to get into, steroids and other PEDs. Guys do that to improve their chances of playing at a high level and winning a Super Bowl. So I think the coaches who can communicate it the right way are going to be the ones who see themselves with 65 of 90 on their way to 77 and on their way to 85% when the regular season rolls around, Peter.
Can I just say one last thing about this, Mike, because everybody is probably screaming, hey, talk football. But the one last thing
But it is football, but that's the thing. It is football. Yeah. It's an important factor in how football is going to be played in 2021.
There is no question about it. But just think about this for all the people who say, if the Bucs only have 50%, don't worry, they'll get over it. They got Tom Brady. The only thing to think about is that most of America, starting in August, September, October, I would say most of America is going to be back to living fairly normal lives. People going back to school, colleges reopening, all of these things. People going back to their offices and stadiums, being full or close to being full. There's going to be one very significant exception, that the superstars on your team who choose not to be vaccinated, you talk about do everything you can to win a Super Bowl. Can you imagine you report to training camp on July 27th, let's just say, and if you don't get the vaccine and your team isn't at 85%, just imagine that every day for the next 6.5 months, while all of America is back to normal, everywhere it's back to normal, you are not back to normal because you got to get up every morning and at 7 o'clock get in your car on off days, bye weeks, between training camp, everything, every day. You got to go get a nasal swab, and every day when you walk into your building, you have to have a mask on. Nobody else has a mask on, but you got to wear one because you won't get the vaccine. To me, not getting the vaccine is an incredible commitment to whatever the principle is for not getting the vaccine. And it is such a gigantic commitment that's why I feel at the end of the day, so many players are going to say, hey, screw this. I don't want to have my life like it was in 2020. I want to be free in 2021.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.